Hello everybody, we're back again for our Northampton Film Festival Screen Northants Academy Day. So it's a day of free workshops, talks, all kinds of things, Q&As, because Screen Northants, which runs Northampton Film Festival, it's all about kind of opening doors to the film industry. So making sure that people from Northamptonshire and hopefully maybe some more people watching from around the country, maybe even the world, you know, can get a look behind the scenes of film without having to pay for it, and they can ask questions in the chat under these videos and hopefully get them answered by people that maybe they feel like they don't have access to normally. So today we're going to be speaking to Tim Hands. Now Tim got in touch with us, sent us an email, kind of he'd heard about Screen Northants and I think liked the kind of work that we do a lot with young people and people wanting to get into the film industry. And just said, you know, if you ever need anything, let me know. And he probably regretted that because we had shot our feature film Nen, and it needed quite a lot of sound post-production work, and we absolutely roped him in, and he has saved our bacon in many ways. And actually Paul is doing the final sound mix on Nen, which premieres on Monday at Warner Brothers Delaney Studios in Soho today, which is why you're probably sick of hearing my voice alone. But yeah, so we owe a lot to Tim, so I'm going to bring him in now. Hi Tim, how are you?
Very good, thanks.
Good. Yes, I don't know if you did regret sending that email, but we've picked your brains about many a thing and used your services, I think just regularly ever since you sent that email. But I think that's the joy of the film industry. There are people out there that want to talk to you and help you. Yeah,
it's connections. And yeah, the interesting thing for me is just, I've got a little double voice thing going. So I wanted to explain what I do in post-production sound, because I think it's an unusual area. I certainly, when I was at school, it was nothing I knew about. I grew up in Coventry. There's no film industry in Coventry, and there still isn't. But it's just to give context. I wanted to just go back quickly, just through my path into the industry. A lot of questions that come from younger people wanting to get into film and TV is that they don't actually understand how it happens. And what I was going to say is, for every single person that has done it, there's a new story. There is no kind of career path. It's a kind of accidental kind of thing that happens. So what I found was, I was at school, I was at a grammar school, it was very academic. They were pushing you into sort of traditional professions. And if you weren't the best, they would sort of suggest you got an apprenticeship at a local engineering company, which there were lots of in Coventry at the time, none of which suited me. I was good at drama. I was inept at music, but I could play guitar and I could pick up songs and learn them by ear, which kind of clued me in, I guess, ultimately to where I ended up. And I was very good at art. So I decided after A-level I never wanted to do another exam again, but I did want to go to university. So I went and did fine art at Nottingham. 3 years of fine art was great. Learned to be independently motivated, created lots of pictures, but 32 people on the course, 31 of whom could draw and paint better than me. So I discovered photography, screen printing, films. There was a video camera, so I picked up the video camera and started making silly videos and arty kind of, I don't know, I can't even remember. But that led me at the end of 3 years to think, okay, what am I going to do now? Because I still, don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I applied to do a PGCE in art, so I'd become a teacher, and at the same time, rather laughably, applied to the Royal College of Art to do an MA, Master of Arts in Film. I got offered both. So the obviously intelligent thing to do would to do the PGCE, get a job as a teacher, earn money and be a grown-up. So I took the MA in film. And 2 years later, graduated from the Royal College of Art, and I'm now 24, and I still haven't got a clue what I want to do for a living. Fortunately for me, at the end of that course, there was a competition run by Virgin Films, which sent various film schools off to exotic locations to make films about their holiday destinations. We at the Royal College of Art managed by hook or by crook to land Necker, which was Richard Branson's private island. So we went to Necker, which is normally $5,500 a day, and spent a week on Necker making a film and sampling their new menu for their incoming guests. There's actually a picture of us there on the shared screen, Becky, if you want to.
Yeah.
There we go. That's Necker Island when I was 24. Anyway, that's a simple thing. What happened was the tutor that took us out there, Phil, was a freelance film editor at the time, and Phil O'Shea is now a screenwriter, but he cut the film with me and one of the other people when we returned to the UK, and we did the sound for it. And then Phil offered me a job as an assistant sound, or an assistant picture editor, should I say, on documentaries. We did a series called In the Know for BBC Schools. That was how it started for me. There was no plan, there was no desire to be a sound editor or a picture editor. I had to really still, and all this education, still didn't know where I wanted to go. So Phil gave me my first job. I learned from that earning a living was really rather good, because I earned in a week as his assistant pretty much what I got as a term as a student in a grant. Yes, we used to have grants back in those days. So when I went on from then, we had worked in those days on film, 35mm and 16mm. So it was all very sort of clunky. And this is some of the gear that we use. That's a Steenbeck. That's a competitor. There's another Steenbeck. So there's a flatbed thing. So we actually handled proper film. That's a splicer. And if you can see my picture down in the corner there, I have my own one from back in the day. We had loads of film cans, which weigh a ton, and we had to move them around. It's this stuff, this is, if it looks like stuff from the 1940s, that's because more or less it is. For decades and decades, film editing didn't really change. There's a cutting room, a complete mess. And all the little kind of clunky gear, which sounded terrible, these little loudspeakers connected up to them. The hum off these things was louder than the sound that came out of them. And there's me with hair back in the day on probably an omnibus for the BBC. Anyway, things have moved on. We did all that sort of stuff. When we mixed films, what I learned to do, if I just look at that Steenbeck there, you'll see there are 7 discs on there. The front 2 are carry the film, which is projected by mirrors into this. And then there were 2 tracks, so you could edit. You could what you call A and B, the sound, so you could overlap incoming and outgoing sound. Now it may seem sort of simple to some. You may not even occur to you that that's a thing that we do. But you would then, when we made the soundtracks for the films, we would add additional material, which we would then put onto other tracks. So you'd build up a whole load of tracks over time. And then you would take it into a dubbing theatre. and they would mix. So all this stuff was new to me. I had absolutely no clue. There is a dubbing theatre, giant sort of cinema, if you like, where we mix the films. And we used to have to carry these trolleys of cans around. There would be literally, they would weigh a ton. There'd be 10, 15 cans of 35mm film stock, which was the mag, actually, the sound, which would then, like a barra boy, wander around Soho from place to place. And now things have ramped up, so we can, that's a 1 terabyte solid state drive, and that can carry probably 2 feature films on it, all the material. So things have changed in my career. So you'll see all these little workstations in the picture down here. So you have the various areas of sound that are covered by our team of sound editors. So this is where we get into talking about really what is post-production sound? What do we do? So let me try and explain it. I think for most people when they watch this, and it's certainly the case before I went into the business, that the sound that you see associated with a film or TV show that you're watching was just recorded there. So the camera points at the situation. The sound that you hear is the sound that we hear. That's it. It's more complicated than that, obviously, ultimately. If I give you an example, I'm going to give you this example because I'm going to show you a film with a very similar situation in it to explain the various levels. But if we have somebody walking up a street, an actor walking up a street, it's very straightforward. They walk up the street, they turn left, go up a garden path, open the front door, walk in. During that walk, you've got the sound of the footsteps. We have tweety birds, we have distant traffic, we have the opening of the door. We have a car perhaps goes past, or maybe some people down the end of the road shouting. You'll listen to all of that on the mix of your film or TV show and think, that's what I'm looking at. That's what was happening when that actor walked up there. No, that's not what happens. Actually, the car going past will have gone past, but it would have been organized to have gone past. It'll be a timed thing, unless you're guerrilla filming, it just happened to have done it. The sound of that car will sound very, very weedy. So we put a proper car sound in. And then the footsteps that you're hearing are most likely not very clear on the original sound. Those will be replaced with what we call Foley. I'll explain that in a minute. The tweety birds you're hearing, well, when we record on location, we record with one mic generally pointing at the actor. Or maybe they'll have a clip mic too, so you get 2 channels. And then the distant city traffic, the people shouting down the road, all of those are layers of things that we've added in. So pretty much 90% of what you're looking at and listening to isn't what was happening there on that day. So get that picture in your mind, and then this will all make more sense. So the areas of sound post are effects editing. You probably perhaps have heard of the term sound designer. It's a sort of glorified version of an effects editor, which some of my sound designer friends will not thank me for saying. But if you've got, a thing like a dragon in Game of Thrones, then Paula, who was the sound designer on that, created those sounds. They come from nothing. You've got to make them. A sound effects editor will add existing sounds, for example, the car passing, the door opening, and then the Foley side of things is the footsteps, the cloth movement, the newspapers, teacups up and down. And these kind of things came about as a way of creating, enhancing our soundtrack, but also to add in material so that when you do a foreign version, you redouble the voices in Italian or French, that you still have that sound, the actuality sound is all there as well. So I'm just looking down at my cheat sheet here just to make sure I don't forget anything. So categories, yes, effects, Foley, dialogue, ADR, which is automated dialogue replacement. I'll explain that in a minute because I'm going to get into what I do, which is dialogue editing specifically. And then music, obviously. Although the music department is sound, it's not the sound department. It's a separate entity, a separate department that is connected to us, but doesn't really, it's autonomous. It's to do with the composer, and there's usually a music editor associated. And I'm going to focus on the sound, the actual sound things. So when we mix, there's the theatre that I was showing. That's where we'll mix the sound. Here's Warner Brothers Delaney, which is actually where Paul is mixing today. I don't know if he's in that studio. That's their sort of flagship one. But as you can see, it's pretty epic. And yes, more complicated than a jumbo jet to operate. But there you are. I don't do that. I have people who do that for us. There's Galaxy, which is in Brussels. That is Onomatopoeia, who is run by up in Liverpool. So there is film business outside of the Southeast. That's run by a guy called Sam August, who used to be my assistant back in the day. So let's get off of those. We've gone from all that archaic equipment to much more sensible digital stuff. There you go. That's my setup that I used at Delaney when we did Pirates and an Adventure with Scientists for Aardman. And you can see my space behind me, but in front of me, that's my room. That's my own studio now. So thinking back to those clunky old bits of equipment and dodgy looking bits of film hanging up, it's all done like this now. So my area of expertise is dialogue editing. Part of that means that I have to re-record with the actors. So if we look at, say, something like Game of Thrones, we have all these kind of action sequences set in a medieval society. So everything that happens there, obviously, if it's shot modern day, you've got traffic in the background. You might have aeroplanes going overhead. These are standard sort of issues that are problems, along with just noise factor. Like there's a fight scene in a snowstorm. They'll have used these huge, great wind machines that sound like hovercraft, which will be, kind of sound that goes on. So you can barely hear the dialogue of the actors. So that's where this automated dialogue replacement process comes in, where we bring the actors into the studio and get them to re-perform those lines. So just to show you how I really do it, there's Taron Egerton and Kit Harington and Gwendolyn Christie and Amelia Clark and Benedict Wong. So those are all people that I've worked with. That's a small sampling, and then they paid me to be in the photo with them. So there's another area. Just I'm trying to cover as much as I can before I get into showing you some stuff. There's another thing which we call group. Now, group ADR is a really important thing. If we look at a scene in a bar, we have our two principal actors sat at a table having a conversation. Behind them are other people at other tables, some people at the bar. The bar, barman, bar staff are going to be there. They're all talking, but they're not actually talking. What they're doing is they're doing this. Because we don't want to hear their voices. We only want to hear the key characters having their conversations. All that stuff that would be going on in the background would just be in the way. So they have conversations which they mouth. We try and lip read some of that, and some of it doesn't need to be lip read, but we fill in. So we give a layer of dialogue, and this is done by what we call a loop group, and we bring them into a studio, just as we do with the actors. There is a studio, and there is a loop group. That is one day on Game of Thrones. And these, we're doing a big battle sequence. So these guys would come in, they do all the shouting and screaming and stuff. You might recognize a couple of people. But anyway, this fella here is in Home, a comedy series on Channel 4. But they do all sorts of stuff, actors. A lot of these voices you'll have heard on video games. You will have heard virtually every single one of those fellas somewhere on TV and films that you've watched recently, because they will be the people passing by in the background. Okay, so that's all of those things. I'm going to move into, this is a film called Blithe Spirit. Blithe Spirit is available, I think, on Amazon Prime, possibly on Netflix. But anyway, you can find it. Let's have a look at this. Those of you familiar with multi-channel things like music, you'll understand that we might record drums across 6 or 7 channels. We'll add a bass guitar. We'll put some guitars on, some keyboards, vocals. So all of those are sort of layered tracks, which then are mixed down into a sort of master, if you like. It's the same principle with film, a little more complicated. If I show you this here, Blithe Spirit, we have a picture track and what we call a guide track here. This guide track is the sound from the day. I'll play it out in a minute. The sound from the day is then recorded on multiple mics. So here, this is a boom microphone. It's muted out because it actually isn't any use. I'll play you it in a minute and you'll see why. Below that, we have what we call clip mics, radio mics, which are usually tucked into clothing, sometimes hair, have you got, if you have any, discreetly hidden amongst the costume. And that picks up a much closer recording, often a sort of safety thing. Boom microphones tend to give a better sound, but not strictly so. And in some cases, we can mix both. There are ways of doing that. So then we have this ADR, which I was talking about, which is bringing the actor in to re-record. That's a section of ADR there. And then below that, we have group tracks. These are all chatter tracks that are going on. I'm going to play you this scene. This is actually from a mix that we did. I'm going to have to keep moving the picture around, so please do bear with me. So this is, I'm going to play you the sound. Now, because we're using this webinar software, I can't plug the Pro Tools things directly through it. So I'm going to play it in my studio for you. So it might sound a little bit of roomy, but you'll get the idea. This is a scene. Now, remember what I said earlier about an actor walking up the road and a car passing? Very relevant on this. Okay.
I told her how profoundly interested I was in anything to do with the occult, and she blossomed like a rose.
Hosting an evening with a professional charlatan sounds like an absolute scream.
Doesn't it?
But will it get you closer to finishing your screenplay?
I need the old girl to show me a few tricks of the trade. That's what's going to make my new hero truly unique.
What's so unique about him?
He's dead.
Dead?
As a doornail. He's the victim of a vicious unsolved murder and communicates with the living through a medium who helps bring people back from beyond the grave.
Maybe she could resurrect your career at the same time. Daddy's on the warpath. He's certain to find another writer if you don't deliver soon.
Okay.
I
So you can hear there, well, firstly, the first thing you should notice after what I've explained to you is that it sounds rather sort of light. There's not really anything going on around it. Now, I've only got the dialogue tracks on this particular film, so I can't give you all the sound effects that were added. But what I can show you is the process of how we edit dialogue. Now, when I said to you about the boom track being not very good, here is that boom track just at the start with Dan Stevens walking down.
I told her how profoundly interested I was in anything to do with the occult, and she blossomed like a rose.
So you can hear there's a little bit of the voices of the people on the street there, a little bit. This is very off, and he's so distant. There's nothing we can do with that. However, he does have down here, if I can make it, if I can make it clear, there we go. This is his clip mic.
I told her how profoundly interested I was in anything to do with the occult, and she blossomed like a rose.
So that's tucked into his costume somewhere. I don't know where, but it just picks up. It's usually on the chest, and that picks up. So then we have also the same thing with Isla Fisher, who's in there. So what I've done is they're recorded and they're overlapping each other. So Dan's dialogue on her chat, I've muted out, but kept him going here. She then comes in.
Well, hosting an evening with a professional charlatan sounds like an absolute scream.
So all the way through there, I've separated them out. Her lines, his lines are on their own channels. You'll see some of these things are colored as well. And that's because things have changed. Let me just look at Dan. This is how intricate things can get. All right, here's Dan's line. This is his actual track from that sequence. This bit's colored in pink here. I've changed something. You can see the waveform is slightly different. What happens is on Dan's line here, just going to open everything up.
Profoundly interested I was in it.
Hear that?
Profoundly interested I was.
Just there. There's a nasty, horrible creak going on there, and I don't know what it is, but it's all over his voice. But on another take, he's saying the same lines.
Profoundly interested I wasn't.
So there, I've changed it out.
Interested I was.
I've gone for a different take, but that different take is also slightly different speed. So I've had to put a little cut in it to try and line it up so it's all in sync. So that's that level. So we go through clicking and cleaning up. Also down here with Isla, they swapped a sound and they like this take.
Maybe she could resurrect your career with this.
But that's not actually what she's saying. If you look here, this channel is actually the real dialogue, but it ran out.
Pull back from beyond the grave.
It just doesn't have anything there. I don't think she's on it at all. Let's have a look. Hang on. Oh, no, she is. Hang on. Here we go.
Well, maybe she could resurrect your career at the same time.
They didn't like the performance, and there's a load of noise here.
Same time.
So they swapped it for a different take.
Maybe she could resurrect your career at the same time.
But that take had loads of key rattle on it. So I had to clean out the key rattle.
Your career at the same time.
Hear that?
Yes,
But I've got rid of it.
at the same time.
It's much shorter. So there's all these kind of things we're trying to do. Now, the big thing is the car pass. On here, you remember just on this section here, we had a car going past. Just going to do that again.
Hey.
I need the old girl to show me a few tricks of the trade. That's what's going to make my new hero truly unique.
What's so unique about it?
He's dead.
Now, it sounds fine. You can hear what they're saying. The car passes. We accept it. We see a car. But when you go in a cinema, that car will come up in the middle speaker, stay in the middle speaker, and go away in the middle speaker. You won't have the stereo effect of a car going past because we can't move the car to the right and the left without moving their voices with it. And they're in the middle of the screen. Dialogue tends to stay in the middle of the screen. So how do we fix that? Well, we add a new car pass from our effects editors. And then we bring Dan Stevens in down here. We cut out what we did have and we replace it with ADR. And bear with me. It's not playing ball. There we go. So here's Dan's line on ADR.
Your screenplay.
Well, I need the old girl to show me a few tricks of the trade. That's what's going to make...
Let's do that again.
Well, I need the old girl to show me a few tricks of the trade. That's what's going to make my new hero truly unique.
So Dan's come in and performed that line in a studio to match his timing. Now, what's difficult with doing this is it's really difficult to match timing. You never, if you imagine someone said to you, okay, take 10 steps across the room. You've done it once. Now say, take those same 10 steps, hit the same markers. You can't. You commit almost the same markers, but even if you get your left and right correct, you can't land in exactly the same place. So the voice will never be quite the same. So you can see here what I've had to do is edit it so that it matches his timing. So if we grab, here we go, that's his original, bring it down to show you what I've done. Looking at the waveforms, in this area here, he went a bit out of time. This bit of dialogue is a little longer than the original, which is here. So I've had to edit it, put some cuts in, soften it, and there you go. So that's the principle of that. And then it means that when we play the whole scene, Let's just try and get it all up. Join it all together. And
I told her how profoundly interested I was in anything to do with the occult, and she blossomed like a rose.
Well, hosting an evening with a professional charlatan sounds like an absolute scream.
Doesn't it?
But will it get you closer to finishing your screenplay?
Well, I need the old girl to show me a few tricks of the trade. That's what's going to make my new hero truly unique.
What's so unique about him?
He's dead.
Dead?
As a doornail.
back
He's the
into
victim
production.
of a vicious unsolved murder and communicates
So that
with
car pass will go back in on the effects tracks, which I don't have, but there you go. And now I talked about group as well. Let me just show you that section. So each of those, all of those people that are in the background there, we don't have any voices for. So I've gone in a studio with that bunch of lunatics that you saw earlier, and we create this. And all of these things are panned, so when you hear it on the screen, they'll be moving around. They'll actually, those people walking past, like the couple there, taxi, you hear all that sort of thing, and it just gives it all life. So we have stuff going on in the background. So I said, this is specifically the dialogue section of our track lay, not the effects. I'm going to swap to another show in just a minute, but I just want to play that scene one more time, if I can do it. This works so much better in rehearsal. There we go. There we go. That's all the tracks. So this is all of the dialogue, the ADR, and the group together.
I told her how profoundly interested I was in anything to do with the occult, and she blossomed like a rose.
Well, hosting an evening with a professional charlatan sounds like an absolute scream.
Doesn't it?
But will it get you closer to finishing your screenplay?
Well, I need the old girl to show me a few tricks of the trade. That's what's going to make my new hero truly unique.
What's so unique about him?
He's dead.
Dead?
As a doornail. He's the victim of a vicious unsolved murder and communicates with the living through a medium who helps bring people back from beyond the grave.
Maybe she could resurrect your career at the same time. Daddy's on the war party, certain to find another writer if you don't deliver soon.
Okay, so that's that principle. So while we get out of that, I'm going to swap to another show. But also, I just want to show you this because this is kind of fun. Two things. One is going back to Game of Thrones, which is one of the big shows I worked on for 10 years. Some of you will have watched Game of Thrones. Some of you will watch the last season, season 8, episode 5 with the attack on King's Landing. Some of you will probably have an opinion on whether the last season was great or not. I thought it was. I don't care if you didn't like it. But anyway, this is a track lay from that. This is just the dialogue tracks. And here we see it's a lot more complicated. All these, there are 24 dialogue tracks here, which is all the action from recorded on the day. Below that are these things we call production sound effects, or PFX, which will be little things that are in the tracks that we kind of like door handles moving or something that's got a nice kind of sound to it. But we've probably redone it in Foley or effects or both, but we might want to use this because it's really good, or combine it all and, you know, multi-layer the action. So they're separate, so they're not interfering with the actual voice. And then below that, you can see here lots of ADR, lots of our characters who all came in and redid things, especially anything that was lots of shouting and action. So all of those sword fights, for example, in Game of Thrones, most of what you're hearing, and in particular Long Night, episode 3, right from the outset, right from the first shot of Samwell Tarly breathing heavily in a corridor while they prepare to defend the castle against the army of the dead, it's almost entirely ADR because there was so much noise, so much activity, crew stuff going on there. that we recreated virtually everything with the actors in the studio. They were with me for days re-recording. So there's those things, and then there's our group stuff. So we've got treated things, call outs. We have down here some of our specifics, sort of general Walla, which the Americans call Walla, we call chat. And then below that, you've got foreground activities. So the specifics, that'll be the people walking past, running past. And each thing, as you can see, it's massive. It's absolutely huge as a session. And the way to prepare for all of that, and I've lost my mouse, which isn't really very helpful. So while I find my mouse, I'm going to show you the ADR cue sheets. This is the kind of thing that we present to an actor. So there's the one for Dan Stevens. So he can see there's time. Let's see, can you see? So there's times here where it comes in. Each thing has a particular cue number, so we know what it is, a description of what it is. My version of the same sheet has a bit more on it. It'll explain why we're doing it there. New line. If we go down to that thing with the car, there you go. Down the bottom here, traffic. I mean, it's obvious. And we've got over here take numbers, so it goes up to 24. I can assure you it quite often goes way beyond 24. And I'll mark those cue sheets up, and then I'll bring those selections into the edit, and I can refer back to them to remember why I did things, which takes were best. For those of you, again, who are fans of Game of Thrones, if you think back to each of those things, each time somebody says something, you've got to write in their line. It's got to be exactly as they said it on the day, with little pauses and spaces and markers saying breath here. And it can get very complicated. But always amused me that Hodor from Game of Thrones, his cue sheets look like that. All of them. Hodor, because that's kind of all he ever said. Okay, I'm going to go to Dark Crystal, because I think this one helps, because I have some of the effects stuff for this. The Dark Crystal was a puppet show. Some of you may have seen it. If you haven't seen it, you really should, because it's groundbreaking. Yeah, that's interesting. It's not loading. Oh, yes, it is. Okay. Dark Crystal was shot on location, well, in studios, with the puppeteers doing all of the voices. So if I play you a little sequence here, this is what we had. Now, you've got to understand that the puppets are full size, so they're over the top of the actor or the puppeteer. The puppeteer is operating the movement of the puppet, the figure. The eyes and the mouth are operated by another technician somewhere else. And what you've got is inside those costumes is 3 feeds. One is a talkback mic and with the other operator, the director's voice, and also the other actors, the other puppeteers. So there are 3 things being fed into these costumes, and then the actors will perform. But of course, they're sort of a bit muddy because they're inside these costumes. There's this huge, great space. So it sounds a bit like this.
It had better work.
Of course, my Emperor. You will see I have solved all our problems. Will snacks be served?
Now, the interesting thing with this is that all of those voices with the puppeteers, well, not all, but most of those voices were replaced by cast actors. So when we came in to finish in this, we had to bring people like Jason Isaacs in, who played the Emperor, and his voice would be recorded and fitted here.
This had better work.
So that's Jason doing the same voice that the puppeteer did, or the same words. And then Benedict Wong has got his things. He's here.
I've never liked this infernal place.
And each of those characters, and this is a vast show, each one, we recorded every single line, every breath, every reaction they did. We re-recorded with the actors that we'd chosen to revoice the puppets. And each one was fitted on their own track with a team of us doing this recording and fitting. So if you look down here, every single member of cast has a track associated with them. So I'm going to zoom out a bit. You can just see how complicated it is. Look at all that. Each one of these is a track that represents a character in the show. This is just the first episode. It was 1 hour long, and it's still going on, even there. Look at that, all the way down. And all of this has to be mixed and managed. So if I play you a little section, maybe from here, with just the voices that we fitted. I'm just not going to get everything. I'm just going to give you some. Here we go.
I've never liked this infernal place.
I think you will be most impressed.
So every single thing has been edited, but it's not been mixed at this stage.
Of course, my emperor. You will see. I have solved all our problems.
There's Mark Hamill doing his voice of the scientist.
So they all have these kind of character voices that they do. And I spent months working on it, so that's why I can do Mark Hamill quite well. When it's all mixed together, we end up with it sounding like this.
This had better work.
Of course, my emperor. You will see. I have solved all our problems. Will snacks be served? No.
So you can see that the levels of the voices, they've been EQ'd. They've been put into a space. You can hear a bit of verb around it because there is a sort of huge chamber that they're working in. But that's just the voices. Then we also need to add sound effects. Otherwise, what is it? You know, what's going on? So this is what the sound effects speaker do. So this is the fun stuff for those of you like, you know, the silly noises department. This is where so there's all the little creatures going on, all the rattling of change. This is Foley and effects mixed together. And we go back to what it was before.
Ah, contemptible contraption.
See, there's almost nothing on there. There is nothing. So it's all been created. So when we put that together, so we put the voices and the effects together now. Let's do that.
It smells terrible in here.
I've never liked this infernal place.
Patience. I think you will be most impressed.
And then, so that's everything brought together except for the last thing, the last component, which is our music. Now, like I said, it's a slightly different department, but the principle is with post-production sound is your voices give you the story and some detail for background stuff. The sound effects present you with the things you're looking at. Everything in this has been replaced or created. But then you need the emotional content. Now, a certain amount, obviously, from performance, but to underpin that, music. So you would add in there's music just to set scenes, just to kind of make it a little dark or a little happy or whatever's going on. If we play all that together now.
It smells terrible in here.
I've never liked this infernal place.
So there you go. That's the whole process of building. I've tried to keep it sort of straightforward. Tried to make it make sense. There's a vast amount more that goes on, but I don't want you having cocktail sticks under your eyelids trying to stay with me. I just wanted to give you a sense of what we do and how detailed it is. Most of every film and TV show that you watch will have been recreated the sound will have been recreated for almost every component. We might choose some from location, but virtually everything has been done. Battle sequences, those explosions, if you heard them for real, they kind of go, that's about it. Little bullets ricocheting off metal will just go, or that's it. So everything's been recreated. So just remember this next time you're watching TV and film, that virtually everything you're experiencing in the audio is fake. We've added it, we've changed it, we're leading you up the garden path, but we've also made it exciting for you. And if we've done our job properly, you shouldn't notice. If we've done our job bad, it'll take you out the show. But if we've done it right, you won't even notice it's happened. The dialogue will have been replaced, sound effects have been added, and the music will be making you feel something that ordinarily you probably wouldn't feel. So I think I've covered everything I wanted to at rapid pace. So if there's any questions out there, this is the time.
Yeah, we've got lots of questions actually. I'm a bit worried about fitting them all in. There's a few from. I'm going to start. Where should I start? I'm going to start with this one actually. It's quite a broad one and a very good question actually. So how much of the total production time is allocated to sound design, and is it one of the more pressurized elements for meeting deadlines?
How much is allocated to so there's an upcoming TV series that I'm going to be doing. There's a sort of kind of rule of thumb with productions which people will kind of apply, whether it's a kitchen sink drama or a huge great sort of medieval battle sequences, like, well, it's 50-minute show, so that's 2 weeks, isn't it? Which of course is not necessarily the case. There is a sort of fine line with TV stuff, just in terms of budgetary constraints and also just broadcast dates. Usually there's something slotted in, so you can end up having to work longer hours, weekends and stuff, but if you enjoy what you do, that's kind of the nature of it. Probably for a very busy TV show, an hour long, you probably get 3 weeks to put your sound together. More often than not, on a regular TV show, it's 2 weeks. That's, you get the material on the Monday, and 2 weeks later you deliver it to a theatre to mix. Feature films are a little bit different. They kind of run longer generally. Say, I don't know, anywhere between 8 to 16 weeks. Some of the really bigger ones will go on for months. I did a film back in 2000 called Four Feathers. I was on it for 14 months. There was lots of recuts. You've got to factor in as well that every time they change an edit, you have to either expand or contract your tracks to match and add new material, or remove some glorious work that you've done, which is no longer required because they've chopped that scene out. Which can be really soul destroying, but there you are. And one of my favorites in terms of that is thinking of that, there was a huge battle sequence in Four Feathers where we did everything. So all the footsteps, all the cannons, all the musket fire, all the people fighting with swords, the screaming, the shouting, the horses, the sand thrown around. I mean, just on and on and on. And then it's like 16 minutes long, and 3 minutes into it, they took all the sound effects out and went with the music. Took us about 8 weeks to build that up, and they threw it all in the bin. But that's the nature of it. It didn't suffer for it. It was the right choice. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So there's, it's like the director's cut. There's obviously also the sound post-production cut.
Yeah, I made them play the entire scene just once to hear it all as we'd mixed it before they rejected it, just so I could see it, just so I could remember it. I did sound effects on that job. It was a long while ago. Anyway, it is very pressured, but it is also incredibly enjoyable, I think, if you're keen on that stuff. Yeah.
Well, so Stuart's saying about so how can you make the dialogue from ADR not sound like it was recorded in an empty wardrobe? I mean, to be honest, and the whole ADR process generally, it must be so hard for an actor to come back and make it fit and have the same emotion when they were wearing their costume, they were out on set, and now they're in an empty wardrobe or whatever.
One of the problems we've encountered, speaking of empty wardrobes, is that over the last 12 months or so, is recording for film has been impossible to get people into studios because of COVID. So people have been recording in the wardrobe. So if you're actually referring to even mid-budget things that sound like they're in a wardrobe, that's probably because it was. But essentially speaking, you get in a pretty sizable room with decent boom mics on and a clip mic, and the trick is to get the actor to move as much as anything. It's good miking and it's actually performance. For fight sequences, I'll take all the paraphernalia out of the way so there's an empty space, and actually get a boom in above them, and so they can move around and we'll follow them with a boom, so it actually is physical. The worst kind is if you get into a little booth with glass around, a lectern in front of you, and then you try and recreate something. It just doesn't work. It's all about trying to give the actor space to perform. And my job is to coax that performance out and remind them the little subtleties they're missing, the pitching in their voice, the projection in their voice when they get up. Because people just take the easy option, or don't actually, actors, it doesn't matter that they're big names. They'll miss the things, like they kind of adjust themselves in the seat while they are saying that word. You've got to get them to do the same thing. If they don't do that, it's going to sound flat and dead and doesn't belong on what you're looking at. So actually, all of my stuff sounds great, so it doesn't ever sound like it's been recorded in a wardrobe. So.
Well, what if someone's got like no setup at home and they're maybe just trying to, people do this, but if people are trying to record, a bit of ADR on an iPhone or something, what kind of setup would you suggest?
Well, there is actually a really great little bit of kit for recording on iPhone made by Todd AO. You can find it on their website, and it'll even give you streamers, because you have these streamers that go across the screen so that it and beeps, so you go deep, 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 and then you'd say your line, or the streamer runs across, and where the streamer meets the side, that's when you start speaking. This little piece of kit will allow you to prepare from your picture little sections which you can put into your iPhone. And I recommend that if you do that, you get a wardrobe. They'll even show you how to do it on their website, and you can record soft furnishings around you. Speak directly at the mic and get a better mic. There's little mics you can buy to stick onto iPhones. I've got one here made by Rode, which is like a little rifle mic. It sounds pretty good. It ain't a studio, but you know what? It sounds pretty good. Don't use the inbuilt mic. They sound terrible.
Oh, there you go. Well, another kind of software question. What software are you using? Is Audacity any good? Is that how I say it?
Yeah, Audacity. Yeah, I mean, really, the industry standard is Pro Tools, and there are some other bits of software that people use, but Pro Tools kind of took over the industry because once it got into theatres for mixing, it just became so difficult because of the nature of the change of platform, or having to convert these set of files so that thing will play it back. It all got very complicated for a while. And it seems to have more or less settled down now, with Pro Tools being the dominant with one or two others. Audacity, yeah, you can use that, but I'd suggest that you really want to get into Pro Tools if you can. That's the one to learn if you want to get into the business, because that's what everybody else is using.
And is it something that you can use and kind of learn to use relatively easily? Maybe you're not going to use all of the whole array of whatever, but you can not me, but almost.
Yeah, there was a I don't know if they still do it. There was a free version which just gave you limited capabilities, and it's an easy one to learn. To use that to learn. And also now, I mean, obviously it's all going to be investment. It's going to be, you've got to put some money into it. But it's when I started getting into buying our own digital equipment, I mean, you take out loans £40,000-50,000 to buy all the kit you needed, and you need a van to drive it around in. You can do it on a laptop now with a decent set of headphones. It's ridiculous. Like a laptop, a spare screen, decent set of headphones, and a relatively simple Pro Tools outboard box. it's really changed. You know, the ability for people to do relatively professional work with a relatively cheap setup is there now. It's good. I mean, you can do it.
Amazing. I've got another question from Stuart, which is about actors being told not to bash a mug down on the table while also saying their line.
Yeah.
But anything else that you advice for actors, I suppose, about making sound easier, particularly I suppose on those low budget jobs where actually maybe you don't have you don't have all these people to help you solve your problems.
Yeah, I mean that is a good one. Yeah, so you'll see actors who are, you know, they'll say, well, that's just the way it is, and you know that's because they've been taught, you know, they don't want to come into a studio with idiots like me and redo that, so they will do that sort of timing. The thing with performance is it's just not as straightforward as making rules. There are actors I work with who you'll stack up 6 takes from production, from the location, and they'll all be roughly the same timing, that they know their performance, they've worked it out, they know how they want to say it, they want to know how they're going to intonate that, where they're going to be loud, where they're going to be soft, and they're very disciplined. That's a particular approach. There are other actors who just in the moment will just do what they do, and there's not a right or wrong about this. So those ones, and there are lots of them, will just give you some crazy magic that you didn't expect. So in terms of making it easy for us, the only one that is a real problem is overlapping dialogue, where if you've got 2 actors talking and then they interrupt each other, if you happen to want to cut to a different angle at that same moment, then the other angle they're interrupting each other. On the edit, you'll end up with 4 voices where they're kind of overlapping each other. So then the job is to try and fix that. So where possible, and this difficult, obviously, if they're performing together, is trying not to overlap. If you're off camera and you're feeding lines, don't interrupt, because you'll cause a problem. But, you know, if it's a heated thing, if it's happening, how can you not? You know, it's very difficult. And also, you know, don't fix everything, because otherwise I won't have a job.
It's a very fair point. Yeah, I mean, you know, is half the joy in it trying to fix something that everyone said was unfixable.
Yeah, I mean, it is great when you can fix something that wasn't fixable. I had there was a film called Creation with Jennifer Connelly and Paul Bettany starring in it, and there was a whole sequence where they had a row as a husband and wife, and there were overlaps all over it, and I fixed it. I think Jennifer had to do 1 line. That was it. I managed to go into every single production take they did, and I fixed all the overlaps so there was no doubling up. It took some time, but it meant that their performance was intact, and it was very heated and it was very dynamic. And bringing them into a studio, yeah, we could have done it, but it would have lost something in performance, without a doubt.
Yeah. Yes. Next question about is there an ideal order to bring all these different sound departments into the mix? And yeah.
So each department operates more or less at the same time. So usually on a film, the sound effects department will probably start sooner because they have to build up a library of material. But generally speaking, everybody starts, you know, dialogue and effects start together, work separately, doing their thing. And, you know, if I've got sound effects in my tracks, which are useful, I'll farm them off to the production sound effects editor so they can utilize them, and I'll mute them on my tracks because, you know, we don't want them coming up twice. We work together at the same time through to the mix. Then the dialogues tend to go in first, be pre-mixed first, and then the effects will be mixed directly afterwards, and then Foley after that, and then you bring it all together with the music after that. I have worked differently in the States. I've worked, and they like to mix the atmospheres. So they create the environment that is going to be there, and then mix the dialogue into the atmospheres, then mix the spot effects, if you like, sound design and spot effects, the actual things that are happening in the Foley later. In fact, on that particular show, they did it all live. So we mixed the atmospheres of the dialogue, and then we just went go. And the effects mixer was having to sort of trying to balance things on the fly. And of course, we spent days doing it, but it was very complicated. So yeah, we just kind of work alongside each other, really.
Yeah, and I mean, we've kind of completed our hour, but there's a few just little quite specific questions.
Yeah,
I think people
sure.
probably so we'll rattle through these ones. But
Okay.
yeah, and this might be this is an interesting one. How many decibels lower music than speech do you work with? Is there a standard?
There will be standards, but yeah, you would throw a technical one at me. I'm an art student. I don't know that sort of stuff.
There you go. The answer is do what sounds right when you're in the studio.
Essentially, your music rises and falls as required. It's balanced within a mix. So in terms of levels, the overall mix has to be within certain constraints for broadcast or cinema, but the materials within it are mixed so they don't distort, but we kind of lower and raise and lower things to suit our artistic and creative juices, or do what the director tells us.
Yes, yeah. And I'll just say one last one from the same person, actually. That when you were talking about earlier, you were in Blind Spirit, you had to change the speed of the. I mean, how on earth to do that without making them go funny voice, low funny voice?
Well, there's two methods, if you like, or there's more than two methods, but let's deal with the two. So the one that I learned and I used most is actually to try and cut the existing dialogue by what we call nipping and tucking, which is just to kind of take tiny little bits out. And we used to do this on magnetic stock, which was very complicated because you could only cut on quarter frames. And on 16mm, you can only cut on the frame. But I'd learned how to cut in the middle of a frame, which was quite daring for the day. But these days, we can get down to samples, like within it. It's just so small, so you can tuck up. And I find if you can do it without processing, that it'll sound more natural. But it's just a procedure. Just try it. The other one is to actually do time stretch, which is to use an audio tool where you either expand the voice or contract the voice to fit the space it's supposed to be in, and that's a little bit of guesswork. And some of those plugins that we used to do that do add artifacts if you're not careful about it, and can make them sound a bit weird. But most of them have a vocal component so it will understand its treating voice and act accordingly. But I try to minimize the amount of times that I use that, because I can hear it, particularly if you expand. If you stretch it, it can go like a little kind of like sticking your head in a bucket kind of sound, and it's not very nice. Yeah.
No, I can imagine. But yeah, it does seem like you work absolute wonders, to be honest. And I think from the comments, everyone's been so surprised about the complexity of it. But that's what I love about film. I love, and like you said, we talked about this before, but that whole, we do so much work just to make something be real again. Yeah. And that's what I love about it, because it's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous what we do. And that's I mean, what a great way to make a living.
Yeah, I think that thing that the actors say as we bring them in. So what you want me to do is re-record this line so you can get rid of that car, and so you can add the car back in. And they look at you like an idiot. You go, yeah.
Yeah.
But they do think we're mad, and we are.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we should leave it on that note, to be honest. Oh, actually, no, I've just been, just because basically this just seemed to happen that I know you're based just outside Northamptonshire, but we will allow you to, we'll talk about the Midlands for a moment, but we've been we started off our last film festival and the beginning of this film festival with an Alan Moore kind of project based locally, obviously. He calls Northampton the centre of the universe. But for you, I don't know, Midlands, are we kind of a big deal? Are we the centre of the universe?
I'd like to think we're gonna be. I think it's time things started pulling away from the southeast. One of the things I think is really, I moved back to the Midlands from London, crikey, 15 years ago, I think it is now, because of the internet. And this is the big seller, is gradually the move for people like me in post-production was to work from home, because the real estate costs of renting rooms in London was getting so extreme that it was costing production huge amounts of money. And then some of us volunteered or were kind of persuaded to work from home, which cost them nothing. Eventually, all of those rooms that we used to use sort of got disappeared or used to do other things. So we're all working from home now. Now, of course, with the internet speeds and the rollout of broadband, connections being, super speed, we're able now to upload and download very, very fast. So you can live wherever there's a decent connection and upload and download material. You just don't need to be in central London, except for when there's mixing or recording actors, because it's just better to do it there. So there's no reason why the Midlands couldn't start doing it itself.
Great. Yeah. Well, that's what we aim for. Let's, we're very much about bringing the next generation of talent here, and then let's hopefully keep them here. Bring everyone else here. It'd be great.
Yeah, exactly. Stop moving away.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Tim. That was really interesting, and thank you for just generally being very supportive of Screen Northampton as well, because it's hugely appreciated. And I will let you get back to your Saturday, and we'll look forward to seeing more of your work on the big screen soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cheers. So there you go. We went over time again because it's just so interesting talking to all these people, and particularly when they have a connection with the Midlands, which I love, because that's what we do at Screen Northampton. If you enjoyed it, please tell us. We're at Screen Northampton or at NN Film Festival, #NorthamptonFF. And we've got more coming up today, or if you're watching this on obviously record, there's loads of other stuff on our Facebook and YouTube channels. So yeah, thank you very much. Have a nice rest of your day.